Hey there. Welcome to episode 2 of The Artist in Me is Dead podcast. I'm your host, Rhonda Willers. This episode features a conversation with Stephanie Lenertz. Stephanie's approach to her artwork is uninhibited and joyful. She follows her silliness. Of her art, she says, if it doesn't make you giggle, it's useless. As you'll hear, we start with a bit of the giggles, and this conversation continues to effervesce with joy. We explore what it means to be an artist, where she finds inspiration and materials, and how she uses her time intentionally, even while cleaning her studio. You'll hear how during the pandemic, she decided to host her own art exhibition in, wait for it, her bedroom. Please enjoy this episode with Stephanie Lenertz. Well, hi, Stephanie.
Yeah. Hi, Rhonda.
So let's start with your background and education and your art experience, and just kind of tell us where you started and about any formal training that you've had that you'd want to share.
Sure. I have made art all my life, as a lot of artists will say. So growing up, I would just make art with anything around the house that was available. And I got kind of into it in high school. And then I would say my real formal study of it, when I really started to concentrate on it, was my third year of college, when I came back to River Falls, and I studied ceramics and glass blowing. And I took 5 years in college. So that was 3 years to complete my art degree. But I was studying graphic design before that in college. So I had the foundations classes and stuff. So I studied ceramics and glass blowing primarily at River Falls and graduated with a BFA. I worked in kind of like the glass blowing production field for a little bit. I worked at the Corning Museum of Glass, helping people blow ornaments at the Make Your Own Glass studio. That was really fun. And then I decided I wanted to go more into the gallery side of things. And so I worked in arts administration and gallery management at Northern Clay Center. All the while I was taking different classes and workshops, some through Northern Clay Center, some through different places, and just trying to participate as much as possible in exhibitions and shows and sales and all sorts of things. And now I decided it's time for a little career change for me. So I'm currently enrolled in a program for user experience design at Prime Digital Academy. So I'll graduate in April, but I'm really excited to see where that takes me. And I'm excited to kind of build some experience in that field and then build my very own studio at home.
Oh my goodness. Okay. There's so much that we can unpack from this. So we're going to pull backwards a little bit, so I want to go back because you said that you've been making art your whole life, as most artists would say they have. So I'm wondering if you could share with us an art piece that you remember making as a child, one that maybe visually has stayed with you or the experience of it has stayed with you, and take some time to describe what it looked like or what you remember about it while you were doing it, or even what life it had after you made it.
So I have two things that really come to mind when you say that. The first one is really something I think about a lot because I think it's still very indicative of my process and my interests while I'm making. And what I would do was, I must have been, I don't know how old. I was in kindergarten, maybe first grade. When I would do this, but I would go to the grocery store with my mom, and I remember those green little twist ties they have, right? We would collect a bunch of them and I would take them home. I had my, what I called my twist tie rose collection. And I would just take it's just a green papery thing with wire through it, and I would just roll it up into a swirl, and I would do it like over and over again. And I remember throughout my childhood I would do like repetitive activities like that. And I was really fascinated by the idea of doing something over and over again, which I still love to do. I'll do things like knitting or embroidery and beading, or, that can come out in anything you make. But I just really enjoyed that process of doing things over and over again. And I had a little box of green twist tie roses. And so I keep some in my studio still. And that's what I made my stick figure self-portrait out of.
I was wondering.
Yeah, is the green twist ties.
I love it.
And the second thing that came to mind was we had all of these extra pennies, like a bucket of pennies in our house. And I would take them and make basically like penny mandalas on the floor. And so I would arrange them in different radial designs and kind of decide whether I wanted the head up or the tail up in different places to kind of change the design of it. And I would spend like hours probably setting out these pennies and putting them up in like a geometric design. And then I would just take them all back and do it over again or put them away, So
like there was a comfort with temporal in that case, like that it was just for the moment and then it would be gone.
Absolutely. And that's something I've been thinking about more recently too, is like, why am I making these things that I don't know? Sometimes I'll see artists who are like, I make this and then I throw it away. And I find something really interesting about that. I find something very alluring, attractive about that idea, because while I love to make functional objects that people can use, I also like the process of making art for me is about enjoying myself. Like above all else. And I can't control how other people react to it, but I make it for me, for the process. So
in thinking back to those pieces that you made, how did your family, well, it sounds like you were probably encouraged because like your mom didn't say, stop taking the green twist ties when you're at the grocery store. And then, so like, how did they like support or encourage that? Or how did they respond? Maybe even just that's like the better questions. How did your family respond to you in these two projects or just in general with that?
I think, well, I remember them just kind of being like, well, my parents would always kind of be like, that's amazing. Like maybe not about the twist tie noses, but like about different things. Like when I was little, I figured out, I knew just like one knitting stitch, and I figured out how to like use graph paper to make a pattern to make an image on it. And there were different things like that where I was just doing things spatially or working through things that my stepdad is a scientist, so he was always kind of interested in that. And I just remember them being like, well, that was amazing. And, they kind of supported it through words of affirmation. And I think it was also kind of always this, it still is this thing in my family of like, oh, Stephanie and her penny mandalas. Are you going to, so if I'm like, I don't know, if I'm like working on a little project or something, people will still describe it as like my penny mandala or something, it was just, I feel like it was just recognized as something, an activity I would do. Yeah. A type of activity I would do. I mean, we didn't really have that many, we had a lot of art materials, I guess, kind of like markers and stuff. But I guess I was always really drawn more to the 3D building side of things. So I just found weird materials like those to do it with.
Mm-hmm. So something struck me in that you said your parents, in a way, like gave you words of, or did give you words of affirmation for your work when you were doing it. When you're making, even now or in the recent past, do you hear words of affirmation in your head, or do you self-talk like words of affirmation? Or do you have that critical voice that a lot of artists talk about?
That's a great question. I definitely have a critical voice. I kind of go through seasons with the way that I approach art and the way that I allow myself to talk to myself about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I would say, I do think that the work that I make has been influenced by that encouragement, because I make some pretty weird stuff.
I can't wait to dig into that.
Like I really just like follow my silliness. And I think it can be really easy for people and to put that away and say that's not like valid. But I think having that encouragement from my family, and even still from my friends, I enjoy making people laugh and making people smile.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I've had, my friends have said really nice things about my artwork to me, about how it makes them laugh or smile or you know, different things. And I do think I carry that with me. Of course I have, and it does allow me to, I think, be more free and follow my whims in the studio. Of course I have a perfectionistic streak, and I have an inner critic, of course, but I work against that a little bit. So
what do you tell your inner critic when you start to hear it, or what's your strategy? Because I think a lot of people hear their inner critics and they like succumb to that voice and say like, you're right, I can't do this or something. Like, what do you have, any things that you kind of are your go-to responses when that happens?
Oh yeah, I would say the first thing that I say when I have that inner critic is, I'm just like, why are you taking it so seriously? Like, calm down. It's just fun. It's just something fun. Like, I guess I'm realizing that a lot of the pressure I put on myself is outside of the process. I don't think I put too much pressure on myself while I'm working on a piece. I mean, I'll think about it critically and I'll go through kind of maybe roadblocks and things like that and get frustrated sometimes, but I won't really ever tell myself like, that's a stupid idea, or like things like that. But outside of it, when I'm thinking about my art career as a whole, that's really when those inner critic voices come out. And that is what I've been trying to combat it with lately, especially, is just like, it's not that serious. Like,
I think that's a really, actually, just that in itself, like, it's not that serious. Why are you taking it so seriously? Like, that's a good opening for a mindset to lighten it and let it go. Like, it's a freeing thing to ask yourself, like, why are you taking it so seriously? Because it's much easier to feel the importance. And, you know, I think in art school, they'll talk about like the preciousness of your art and try not to be precious about it. And I think it gets to that point of like, oh, like taking every moment as being very serious, to the point of like, it's so weird because I hear myself contradicting my own thoughts when I say this, but because I know that every decision does matter in the art that we make, ultimately, because of what it can express through some of the most nuanced decisions. But at the same time, you kind of can't make some of those nuanced decisions when you feel that there's so much pressure to be serious about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I definitely went down that road. I think that is something that for me came out of studying art academically.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I would overall, let me preface this by saying overall, 10 out of 10 would recommend. If you're interested, go study it in an academic, like there's so many great things about it. And this is just one thing that I took from it that I learned to let go of, is it can be this amazing thing when you're with your classmates in your cohort and you are forming these ideas almost together.
Mm-hmm.
It's like sometimes it's like your brains form a super brain together and you're working out all these different parts of things. You can share the ideas and everything. And I think within that, rules can emerge from a community, like, you know, it's cheesy when you do this, or it's bad when you do this. Maybe not said so overtly, but I think once I graduated and I got out into the art world individually, just working individually, I was just like, why is that? Why did we all just decide that, kind of? Yeah. But I definitely, especially towards the end of my undergraduate work, I got to this place where I was like, every detail means something. And I'm going to think through every detail and I'm going to write it down so that I know and I can defend my artwork. And that way my art is correct. My art is right. And you can't tell me it's bad because it's right.
And I can defend it. I think that's a really key phrase. Like, I can defend it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that, you know, I think that maybe comes out of a place of a little bit of insecurity, but I did make a concerted effort to try to let that go. Cause after a little bit, I just got tired. I was like, I don't need to think about every single one of these things.
Well, and maybe this is the mindset shift for it. So there's a paying attention to every detail and knowing why, so you can defend it version of it. And then there's a paying attention to every detail that's an inquiry version of it, where it's like, I'm paying attention to this detail because I am wondering about what it will say, or I'm wondering about why I care about that detail. And maybe like on that side, it's like generative and it feels like open. And on the other side, it becomes this like armor that we're trying to protect our artwork and ourselves through. So maybe it depends which place you're coming to that detail decision-making from.
Oh, I love that.
I hadn't thought about it that way until this moment, to be honest, because it's something that I think about too, is like that. Why do I care about that detail? And why were details emphasized so much in academic art training?
Yep.
So, okay, I want to go then on to because we're talking about academic training. So you mentioned that you started as a graphic design major. And then just to kind of clarify, you transferred then to the University of Wisconsin River Falls to finish your art, or did you start out as a graphic design major at the University of Wisconsin River Falls?
I did 1 year at River Falls, where I was kind of just taking some general classes. Then I thought I wanted to try a smaller college. And so I transferred to Simpson College in Iowa. And there I came in with, okay, I'm going to do graphic design. And then I wanted to come back to a bigger environment again, just to have more exchange of ideas, a bigger curriculum. And so I came back to River Falls, and within like the first week, I was like, okay, I'm going to take a glass blowing class, and that'll be like my fun art class for the semester. And just within like I remember taking the class, and by the end of the class, I was like, oh, I'm going to change my major. Because it was just, you see the studio art. And so that was when I was introduced into the studio art side of things, and that you can go to college for art. And I was just like, oh, it's over. Once I saw that, I was like, yeah. So I kept studying graphic design for maybe a semester or two, but then I formally changed over my major.
What do you think took you the bit of time once you did realize that studio art could be a path? What took you what were some of the questions you had before you switched to the studio art major? Like, was there anything holding you back for that semester, or was it just time?
I think in one way, something holding me back was, how will I ever get a job? Will I ever get a job? And of course, when you ask those questions to like professors or other students, the answer is pretty ambiguous, right? The answer is always, it's not like, yeah, you can get a job at the art factory. It's like, that's not what the answer is. It's always kind of more like, oh, you'll figure it out. Like you could go down this route or this route or this route. You could be a teacher. You could, there's so many different options, and I'm an indecisive person, so that kind of freaks me out. But the ambiguity of it kind of freaked me out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But just honestly, no questions I had. There was really no question in my mind. There were things I worried about, but the pull I felt to it was just so strong that there really just wasn't going to be anything that could have kept me from doing it. I know it sounds dramatic, but it's true. I mean, it was even like, I was so taken in glassblowing at first that when we had a project, I remember doing a project in our graphic design class, and I was like, as a poster for an event, and I was like, it's going to be a glass blowing event. Like that. It's just like,
you're finding any way you could to bring that into what you were doing. Yeah.
Just think about it all the time. I would just think about it all the time. And that was when I got into ceramics, I was just like, oh, this is great. You can just be in the studio all the time. I love it. So, I mean, there were worries, but they just
everything else lit up more than your worries lit up.
Yeah, they weren't strong enough to stop me, I guess.
I think that's such a good idea. Like, let's just pause on that for a second. That the worries weren't strong enough to make you stop, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that the joy of it was stronger.
Yeah.
And if we use that as a guiding principle to like deciding some bigger life things, that could be a really useful question.
Yeah, it really is. And it feels great. It feels great when that happens too, because so much of our lives are dictated by worry and indecisiveness and being unsure, but it feels so great when the joy of something eclipses that. Yeah.
So in your time as an undergrad, I'm going to do kind of what we did with the childhood art piece. Is there, or are there some pieces that you created that stand out in your mind as having been pivotal or impactful? And then, what, again, describing like, what did they physically look like? What do you remember about the experience? And then how did they stay with you?
Oh, I remember a couple of things. Recently, I've been, it's weird because I feel like overall undergrad wasn't a time of like pivotal pieces for me. It was a time of general exploration. And so I almost don't feel like anything I created in undergrad was really a genuine expression of, I didn't know what I wanted to make yet. I didn't know what I was trying to make. And they were all building blocks that led me towards something else. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint specific pieces. I remember making ceramic eggs at different scales.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the joy of making really big ceramic pieces. That's something I remember very clearly, is you, being the incredible professor that you are, really allowed me to explore scale in a way that was so exciting. And yeah, it just added this new factor of challenge to clay for me, I think. So I remember those eggs, and I remember there was a shard bottle that I made. So I blew a bunch of glass, just spheres, and then I broke them apart and glued them all together to form this bottle with a bunch of holes in it. I remember some figure drawing pieces that I did with Liz Wenland as our professor. She's so good, and she just made an amazing space for being present in your drawing practice, in your art practice, really. And I think I really started to kind of tap into some interests near the end, like even in my last semester, when I was bringing different elements into my ceramic and my glass projects, and I was exploring installation work and things like that. I guess that's all kind of general things, but
but
yeah.
they are, but I think it's an interesting observation though, that you had, and you feel that your time in undergrad was for exploration. And I think that sometimes when we're in academic environments, that's the ultimate goal. Like, in my opinion, is like that it's a time of great exploration, but we often still are really goal oriented, or the outside pressures are very goal oriented in even that time period. And so it can be hard to capture that essence of exploration, even in our reflection of that time. So I'm interested, because when you say that, how does that kind of experience of exploration, and then thinking back to like, okay, as a child, you explored with like these green twist ties and the pennies, and like, I mean, I know what some of your current work has looked like, but could you talk about how this theme of exploration filters into the work you've made since your formal training?
Oh, sure. So I like to think of it, I always talk about it as my time in undergrad. I was learning, like I just said, I was learning the building blocks. I was learning concepts that I would carry with me forever. So I feel like when I graduated, I really just cut loose, and I started making weird stuff with weird materials, and I was just kind of like, yeah, why not? And I felt as though I felt free, because I think that exploration was able to happen at that time because I wasn't having projects anymore, you know? And I think it happened at just the right time. I think having that structure and those projects and those readings and discussions, that really primed me for understanding what I want to make, and understanding, of course, principles of design and art, but also knowing that there are a lot of concepts out there that you can really dig into. And then I kind of felt like once I graduated, I was like, oh, I don't think anyone's going to judge me if I use melted oil pastels on cardboard, not that anyone would have judged me. That was an internal thing, but yeah, I think it was all about exploring in different ways. So it's almost like, when I was little, I was exploring in a tactile way more so. And in my undergrad, I was exploring in a conceptual way. And I was very into conceptual art and just learning as much as I could about like the ceramic field, what people are doing, things like that. And it was really fun to kind of try my hand at different things. And that's what's great about the structure of undergrad, is that it'll push you to try things that you wouldn't have tried on your own. And then I felt like I had the structure within myself by the time I graduated to explore in my own ways, with material. And yeah, and I guess I had a phase for a little while where I don't know. Yeah, I guess I just kind of did whatever I wanted for a little bit there. And I guess I'm still doing it.
You are. Well, and I was just thinking, okay, for a fun little exercise, could you share, like, kind of like in a sort of listy way, I guess, these different material things you've allowed or made space for you to use in your life? So you mentioned melting oil pastels on cardboard.
Yeah.
So, like, what are some other examples that you could share of, like, just materials that you've let yourself just use now?
Oh, sure. Let's see. When I first got out of undergrad, I got really into bubble wrap. And so I would paint bubble wrap, and I really liked the texture of it, using it in mixed media pieces. I used silly string for some things because I thought that was really cool. I still think that. Play-Doh. One time I fired Play-Doh in like a bisque kiln just to see what would happen. It just kind of turned into ash, but it was cool. Cool to see. One time I layered Play-Doh with earthenware clay and in layers. It was really cool. What else? I use perler beads a lot. Those little melty beads that you iron. I started using a lot of rhinestones and glitter, and I had a whole phase. I still want to do it, but I just don't have a place with proper ventilation. Is Plasti-dip.
Oh yeah.
That thing where it's that material you can dip your like garage tools in, and it just forms a layer of plastic on it. I saw this guy on Instagram dip his whole pot in it, and it just looked, I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm going to kind of copy that.
You had googly eyes on a whole bunch of things for a while too.
Oh yeah. I use googly eyes. I use like kind of like feather boa stuff, pipe cleaners.
You knit things too, right?
Yep. I knit and crochet, and I have wire work. You should see my studio. I just have, it's organized out into bins, but it's just the weirdest stuff, like googly eyes and birthday candle. Oh yeah, I use birthday candles a lot. So I'll have a bin that's like googly eyes and birthday candles, and then one that's like fluff, and just like really I explore a lot of I love going to the craft store and going down the kids aisle, because those are the things that really spark excitement in me, like just these things with a really bright color and really interesting tactile properties, and they're just fun.
Yes, and they're made for fun. Like the whole point is to entice children to have fun when you walk down that aisle.
Yes.
Like, where's the fun aisle for adults? Besides, it's like it's like the party aisle. Like that's the aisle that is only about fun. It sort of seems like
it's still the kids aisle, Rhonda. Yes. Never leave the kids aisle. That's what you need to do. I think
that might be the title of this episode. Never leave the kids' aisle.
I love that. It's true. And it's, I've struggled with feeling like people take my art seriously, or finding a place for my art specifically, which is a whole different conversation, because I use these materials, but it's just so fun. And I really, a lot of the materials are based on like, those childlike joys. And also I of course really love the Y2K aesthetic, and I grew up in that. And so it's just so fun for me to explore that.
It's alive and well. Could you tell us, since you mentioned it, could you tell us about your current studio, but also tell us about the different sort of iterations of your studio you've had since your academic training?
Yes. When I graduated, I had just a very, very disorganized studio in my basement. And I would use it for just all sorts of things. The challenge in my studio, which remains to this day, is that I use so many different materials. And I don't like to keep too much stuff around. So I try to keep it to the essentials, but that doesn't really happen. But
sounds like a bad idea.
Yeah. Yeah. My studio when I graduated was, kind of just a cluster. And I had a table and a couple different bins that weren't very well organized, but had all these weird materials in them. I was using balloons and painting them and then deflating them. And I was like pouring plaster slabs, and then just kind of chaotic. And then I moved and I started to organize it a little better. And so I had, I was sharing an apartment with another person, just a small Minneapolis apartment. And we both make artwork. And so we both needed room for a studio. And so hers went in the living room and mine went in basically the kitchen. It was like this little nook off of the kitchen that still had like the tile floor, but was maybe for like a little breakfast table or something, So I always like to say that my studio was in the kitchen. But I just got a rack, one of those metal racks with a bunch of bars in it,
like a drying rack kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. And I got a bunch of bins and label. I was sick of being disorganized and not knowing where things are. I like to know where things are at all times. And so I separated out my supplies and I got a bunch of bins and labeled them, paint, metals, plastics, stuff like that. And then I just have one like folding table that's it's probably like 6-7 feet wide. And that's still what I use. That's still the system I have, is that I have just a rack with a bunch of bins on it with different stuff. I've always had to kind of improvise when I wanted to do things that required ventilation or ceramic things. So I was lucky enough that I could use the studios where I worked for ceramics. And they had some ventilation stuff there I could use too. But otherwise, you can go outside when it's not winter.
Right.
So
trying to find, I think I'm hearing a couple of different things in there that I think are important too, is just that like being organized helps with knowing what you have and where things are, but also it probably helps with space, because if you're if you have a limited sort of physical space to work in, then that's a way that you can access what you need and also move it around. And then that table, being able to know that I was kind of having this thought about like you're describing your 6-7 foot table, and I have one to the side that I use, and like every January it comes out because it's my like end of year table when I start organizing for the next year. And so I
Mm-hmm.
know when I have that table out, it's like end of year time. Here's that
Mm-hmm.
table. And in a way, like your table becomes this like thing that signifies here's my art space. And no matter where you go, as long as you set up your table, it like tells you this is my art space. And for people who don't have access to a studio space, like a real, like a dedicated square footage studio space, just having a square footage table is a really accessible way to think about this is my space for my art. This is my space for my time to make my art.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's fold up too. I'm also very passionate about having versatile furniture that you can take down and put up.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, what you mentioned, for me, it's a lot about utilizing my vertical space for storage and just materials,
Mm-hmm.
and having that horizontal space,
Mm-hmm.
that square footage for that. I also use the floor a lot for
Mm-hmm.
certain projects. I like sitting on the floor, so it's nice to be able to spread out there. So yeah, I mean, I would say that's always an option.
Well, and here's a quick life hack, as my kids say. If you buy one of those cheaper picnic tables that are plasticky, or if you have the
Yeah,
funds, get one of those nicer oilcloth kind of plasticky tables.
yeah,
Costs, you put that down on the floor and then you work on top of that, and you can just go to town
you can
and
do
like
whatever you want.
whatever you want on top of that little picnic table or picnic cloth. There we go.
Yeah,
Tablecloth. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
That's
have
another.
this big canvas material on top of my, it's like a drop cloth, and I
Mm-hmm.
fold it over and I put it on top of my table so I can just, it gets gross because I'll be like, oh, I'll be like, it's great. You can, if you're painting, you can like rinse out your brush on the canvas, or you can, if you got an extra gob of glue, you can just put it on
Pop it
there.
on there.
Yeah, it's great. I have like googly eyes stuck to it and different scraps.
Those are such good. What a good tip. Like, seriously, what a
Yeah.
good tip. Like, just get a canvas drop cloth, put it on whatever. And then, yeah, it takes away. Because sometimes
Yeah.
there's that inhibition, or, yeah, inhibition. I think that's the right word. Like,
Mhm.
to not make a mess in general in your house or in the space you live in.
Yeah.
And like, when you're free in art making, mess seems to kind of come with it. Like, at least for me, like in cooking too, like a mess always follows me when I cook. So how
Yeah.
do you make a space just kind of allow and welcome the mess? Maybe that's the
Yeah.
way too. Like that canvas welcomes the mess. Like,
Oh
feel
yeah.
free, rub it on me. Like, I'm good.
And I also think for me, I very much identify with that. And I think for me, having those bins is a way for me to know that the mess is like this big. And when I take it out, it's going to get a lot bigger. But when I
Mhm.
put it away, I have somewhere to put it away to. It's not just going to, and
It's
I'll
not
know
going
where
to
to
keep
find it.
growing and oozing. It doesn't just like
Yeah.
ooze and ooze and ooze.
Yeah, exactly. And that is a fun part too for me, is the cleanup
Mhm.
process.
What do you
But
do during the cleanup process that's fun, or what makes it fun?
well, what I really love is the cleanup in the clay studio.
Mm.
So of course that's, I've only ever worked in communal studios, and of course the thing that you do is you work for however many hours, and then you clean up everything that you did. And I always really love that, because it's kind of this for me. I'll do like usually like 4 hours or more in the ceramic studio when I go in.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking about a lot, and I'm bringing a lot of thoughts to that time. And it's a very concentrated time for me usually,
Mhm.
because I'm thinking about ideas and I'm also thinking about technique. And then that time for cleanup is kind of meditative for me. It's kind of a time of reflection where I
Mhm.
can think about what I did in the studio that day and I can think about what I want to try next, or I could think about maybe like the timing. Okay, well, those mugs are going to be ready to flip, and then I'll need to come back to them tomorrow. And, so it really is it affords me that time to reflect on what I just did, and think about what I want to do next. And so that cleanup in my mixed media studio, I think, is the same. And it also gives me comfort knowing that everything's going to be organized and put away. You need to be really clean if you have a tiny studio. You need to be really organized.
So what I heard you describe too is that you bring intentionality to the use of your time, so that it's not just, I'm going to clean up. I've got it. Or the other way, I've got to clean up now. Like it's not that. It's that that in this time of cleanup, it also gives you time to think. It gives you time to process. And like, that is all, like, those are all wonderful examples of intention. And it's making me reflect and just think about like, what are other sort of missed opportunities in our day-to-day lives for bringing that kind of practice to a task that we just have to do, because that's part of the process.
Oh, absolutely. I think our phone takes away so many of those opportunities. One that I think about all the time is when you go to the gas station and you're filling up your gas. That would be a great time to just stand there and look at people or look at cars or think. But they have TVs on every gas station that will yell at you.
I know. And you have to push the button. You have to opt out of it. You have to push the button to mute it. I wish it was an opt-in situation.
I know. But yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities for that, for waiting for your coffee to brew, or
putting away dishes.
Your commute.
Task I hate. Yeah, your commute is a great time to think.
Yeah,
when I used to
putting away dishes is a good one.
I used to have that 45-minute commute, I loved, like, I audiobooked, podcast, just thought. Like, I had so many thoughts during that time.
It's so good. You can call a friend and catch up.
Yeah.
I think I commuted to work for a little while, and that was really nice for me because unfortunately I'm a person that has a lot of trouble waking up in the morning, and I just cannot wake up before I need to. And I would love that time in the morning to like get ready for the day and things. And so that commute kind of forced me to have that time where I'm going to be in the car for 30 minutes. So I'm going to, in that way, be able to take some time and get ready for the day mentally and, think.
Could you, so we've talked, you've described things that you're making and that you have made and all of that. And so what I'm kind of wondering about is, in your present day life, what kind of time do you have to give, or what kind of time do you give towards making and art making in your typical day right now, or week or month, if it's easier, whatever time frame is easier to frame it within?
It really expands and contracts due to my circumstances. So, for example, in the year 2020, we were working from home and had nothing to go and do. I mean, still kind of in that space, but that year especially, like everything, was shut down. And that was just a making bonanza for me. Like, I think for a lot of people, everyone, was like, residency at home. This is, this is an opportunity, you guys. But, I think it depends on my goals. So I like to commit to shows or I always like to have a big goal on the horizon.
External goal.
Yes, an external goal. And I like to make things in small series or in one-offs, but I also like to make things in big groupings. And so at one point I realized that I hadn't made anything in a big grouping yet. And I really wanted to be able to do that. And so I just decided that I was going to have my own exhibition. And so for that, I was intentionally putting aside time pretty much every day. I kind of had an idea of how long it would take me to ideate like the exhibition, how long it would take me to execute it, how long it would take me to install.
Where did you install this exhibition?
It was in my bedroom. My bedroom exhibition.
People needed to know that. Like, you made your own bedroom exhibition. And then that was your big, so that you could make a big project.
Nobody else would accept me, Rhonda. At a certain point I was like, I really think for the next step in my artwork, I need to have an exhibition where I can make a big group of work. And I just thought, why am I waiting around for somebody else to tell me I can do it? I rent this room and I can do whatever I want with it. So I emptied it all out and installed an exhibition there for like a week. And then I took it down.
Tell us about the scope of it. So how many pieces did you make in the end? Tell us about your documentation and sharing, because I feel like that was an important part of your exhibition.
Yeah. Well, it started out as my sketchbook. I have a whole sketchbook that was dedicated to it. It's like a composition notebook because I really like to write more than sketching sometimes. And I guess, I knew that I wanted to make work that really related to each other in a really direct way, because I had been making a lot of individual pieces. And so I decided, I think first I decided, what I wanted the show to be about at its core, which was everyday objects. I think it was like maybe not imbuing personality, but assigning humanity to everyday objects. And then I decided that I was going to do that through the basket form, in different ways and in different media. And then I started to work on some different pieces. I think I kind of had 2 or 3 bigger sections I was thinking about with individual pieces within them. So a big one was I was going to do a set of 9 baskets with different intentions. Like, this basket is creativity, this basket is gratitude, this basket is love, this basket is regret, so I kind of decided that. I sketched and I went through a couple of different iterations of them, and then I just started making them. And then so the exhibition kind of centered around those. And then I started to think about the space and what else I could do within the space. And so I did some wall pieces, and I did one big piece that was like a bedazzled traffic cone. So that I turned into a basket. So yeah, I think it was just the idea of going from concept to different drafts of what that could look like, what that concept could look like, and then thinking about the space, and then installing and just working more on it, I guess. Yeah.
And then you shared online, right? Through your Instagram page, as like, once it was installed. I mean, I was loving your feed during that time.
Yeah. I knew that documentation would be important to me in that, just because it was going to be so temporary and nobody really was going to be able to see it.
In person.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's actually kind of funny. I installed the whole thing and I took some pictures, and then I think I left it up for a while, but I moved my furniture back into the room, so that I could use my bedroom. And then I decided, and then I was like, oh, I don't think I got all of the pictures that I wanted. And I don't think I got a good video. And I was like, oh my God, it's going to be so much work to like redo this. And I just remember being like, Stephanie, you came this far. You just need to do this. You just need to follow through on this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, moved everything back out, and I put everything back up. Some of it was still up at that time, but yeah. And so I spent a lot of time photographing and editing those photos,
Mm-hmm.
so that I would have them, and I shared them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, it's so smart. Again, like you made your bedroom encourage the exhibition so that encourage, meaning so that you move the furniture out so that the exhibition could happen in that space. And a lot of people, I think, well, I don't even know, you'd have that idea first. Like, I think the first time I ever thought about like art, like working on test ideas in our own home was like when I saw the Frank Gehry documentary, and he talks about how his home I'm blanking on this city in California, Venice Beach, maybe, was like his test lab for his ideas. And then like I was researching Betty Woodman, and I saw how she installed her work through her home and in different interior spaces to try it out. And and I think that that's a real opening of an opportunity and an empowering one for people if they realize and harness that, like you said, no one was going to give you a show with what your ideas were at that moment. So, and then you were like, why am I waiting for someone to tell me I can make this work? And so by changing your frame around what your bedroom space could do, you gave yourself permission to make that work too. And you made the space available. And that's a really important step. And anyone could do that. I mean, I think about like, if you need a white wall in your house, because that's a challenge I face because all the walls are painted colors and dark colors, but there's nothing stopping me from painting a wall white and just having to repaint it other than the time involved in working on it. No one's going to tell me no. I mean, my spouse might think it's a little strange for a bit of time, but also kind of like shrug at this thing, like, okay. So it's like, it's reminding me that there's like, it's a good practice to stop and ask ourselves, like, what's stopping us from making something? And is it me that's stopping it? Because most of the time it is. It's actually not the external things. And so how many roadblocks can we pull out for ourselves in order to let ourselves make? So that's one of my questions that I ask everyone too, is it's a kind of a twofold. What's a creative challenge that you often face, and what stops you from creating?
The first one that comes to mind is feeling stupid. I really worry a lot about what other people will think about my work, and by extension, me. And, I have different ways that I try to just let that go. But a lot of my creative roadblocks, or maybe not creative roadblocks, a lot of roadblocks I find in my practice are the act of sharing the work. Social media is anxiety provoking for me sometimes. And I kind of go through cycles where I'll be on it for a little while and then I'll be off it for a little while. So that's one kind of roadblock I face. I think with creativity specifically, it's interesting because I'm kind of going through this phase right now where I'm sort of creatively repressed a little bit. I'm feeling burned out. And it's kind of the first time in, since school I've never really experienced this, that I just don't feel like, it's not that I don't feel like making. I always feel the need to make. I always feel the urge to be working with my hands.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that right now I don't have the energy to create ideas and to design a piece that I want to make,
Mm-hmm.
to think through the subject matter or the new idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so right now I'm kind of just allowing myself that space. I do feel like I've been sprinting for the past 4 years and just like really, really urging myself to keep going and keep going at a really hot, really fast pace,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine. But I think it's a little bit catching up to me right now where I'm like, I need to just step away from that way of thinking for a minute and allow myself to breathe a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because I got so caught up in making, documenting, sharing. And I want to break that cycle now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really just focusing on what part of it gives you joy
Mm-hmm.
and following that.
Mm-hmm. It makes
Yeah.
me think about, there's a new show on called Abbott Elementary. I don't know if it's a comedy.
I've
Have you
seen,
seen it?
oh, I haven't seen it. I've seen commercials for it. It looks so funny.
It's so funny. There, in one of the more recent episodes, is either 3 or 4. One of the younger, newer teachers, I'm blanking on character names at the moment, of course. But anyways, the younger, newer teacher is talking to one of the more advanced teachers, and she's like talking about like, don't you care enough to like make these changes happen now? And the more experienced teacher says, I care. We care so much. We're not willing to let ourselves burn out so that we can keep doing the work. And I think like that hits so real in parallel to art and art making and what you were just describing too, the cycle of, making, sharing, documenting, sharing. And, you can add in like pursuing exhibitions into that. And there's like a whole list of things that's on like sort of this implied checklist of like professional artist does these things. And if you keep going at that pace, sure, you'll have progress. But if that pace also becomes maybe like faster or too much with like what else you can do in your life, then it can cause burnout. And like, think about all the people who like, I think about people who pushed hard, maybe even as undergrads, that I was so incredibly moved by work, like even peers of mine at different times. And then you find out that some of them aren't even making work anymore for various reasons. And sometimes it can be because of that burnout. And then I feel sad because I think our world doesn't have that person's art in it because there was a pressure to push so hard and push so much. And like, is that really helpful then to us?
That's a great point.
You seem at peace with kind of being in this place, but was there, what, maybe talk about like, how did you realize you were in this place where this part is hard again? Like the ideation is like not flowing with you right now.
Yeah. I think it was having a shift in my life, having a big shift in my life. In like the past year, I've made a lot of changes and I've shifted my view of what I had a pretty clear view of what I thought my life was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And those views have changed a lot. So it kind of feels like my entire life kind of changed. I moved, I quit my job, I'm going back to school. I'm thinking about moving again. My values have shifted a lot. And so I think within that, I have been reevaluating kind of every part of my life and
Mm-hmm.
Is this the way that I want to be doing this? Is this the way that I need to be doing this? What is this going to look like 40 years from now?
Mm-hmm.
What,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm thinking about my studio practice in the future. And I think I'm really just at this point in my life where I'm just taking a lot of action. I'm taking action on things that I want to change. And I think reevaluating my artistic practice just is a big part of that. It's such a huge part of my life that reevaluating that was kind of essential.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that brings me so much joy. And it's also something that I did put a lot of pressure on. I think you made an excellent point that people put a lot of pressure on it, and it was maybe killing my spark for a little bit, because I was just pushing, being really strict with myself and working too hard. And I guess it's just that act of reevaluating kind of everything in my life and coming at it with this lens of, is this the way it needs to be? This is the way it has been, but what else could it look like? And I think before I was just so scared of taking a break that I wouldn't allow myself to even think about it. And now I'm just thinking, I think it's okay to do that. You're focusing on some different things right now. And, my urge for making hasn't gone away. My excitement hasn't gone away, but I'm letting it rest.
What do you think when you were talking, you meant like, I'm trying to remember the word you used exactly, but when you're talking about taking a break, like that you were afraid of taking a break, what was the fear that was filling you at the idea of taking a break?
On one hand, I think it is hard to be an artist in this world. I think sometimes it's hard to continue to make beautiful things when sometimes you feel like you're not getting the response you might want. I've heard a lot of stories about people that stopped making. And it's so important to me that I'm just like, I can't like let that happen to me. But I think even that is proof that it won't. I guess, yeah, it's just such a huge part of my identity that I think taking a break was scary, because who would I be without it? And I have such incredible peers that are making prolifically with such incredible results that I think there's a lot of, it's easy to get trapped in this comparison mindset, but that's not healthy.
Right. You're describing what I've just noticed, is you're describing stopping making maybe the physical form, like actually maybe it's more about producing, like you're stopping producing art. But I think I still hear you describing your life and the way you think about life through the lens of creativity. And so one of the things that I've held some conversations about this at like a conference. I did one with a friend several years ago now, but we talked about how we can still be making even when we're not physically making, and that all the other elements of that process go into becoming the art that you create. So it might be you're in a period of reading a lot or thinking a lot even, and you might not be producing even sketches during this time, but you were describing reevaluating even your art practice at this time. And to me, I'm just thinking like, even that is part of your creative practice, and it is keeping that alive. So you're not really like stopped. Maybe you're just not producing, but you're still considering your creativity in your thoughts.
That's true. That's very true. I guess it's just this want now to take all of the pressure off of it.
Yeah.
I remember having a conversation with a friend a little while ago. And I went to school with her, and she was talking about how she hasn't been making for a while. And she's like, but I still feel like I am. Like I am cooking, I'm dancing, I'm having conversations with people, and there's making and creativity and art and all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And that really spoke to me.
Mm-hmm. And also, I think it's just important to normalize that we have pauses in our making and in our art practice from time to time for all sorts of reasons. Right now, you described all these different big life transitions. You've changed jobs, you're going back to school. It could be a death in a family. It could be an illness that you get yourself or someone that you love does, and you become a caretaker. All of those things do change the way that we can spend time in our art and how we even approach our art. And just that like, because they happen, it's okay that the art has to pause because it might need to. And also, even when we pause, I know you said this too, like your art identity, like if we think about what does it mean to be an artist? Like, how do you define that? And I bet if you define it to me here, which maybe you will, it's probably a little bit more than just making something.
Yeah. And every person has a different view on that, right?
Yeah.
I think it's for me, it's I don't know. That's a hard one.
I'm just thinking, like, if you think, like, I'm picturing like a mind map. Like, so we put the word artist in the middle of the mind map, and then we like spoke wheel off all these other things that help define it. And like making art is like one spoke. Right?
Yeah.
But yet when we stop making, we are like, oh, I can't say I'm an artist anymore.
Yeah.
And it's only one spoke.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Everybody should make one of these mind maps and hang it up in their studio as a reminder. That's only one part of it.
Only one part.
As you were speaking about that, I think what struck me was, I think it's this idea of the artist serving the art versus the art serving the artist. And I'm trying to get into a place where the art is serving me.
Tell me more about that.
I'm not working for the art. I guess it's like the art is a part of my life. It's a part of me, and it's a part of my life that makes my life enjoyable. But it's not something that I have to be beholden to necessarily. I guess there's a lot of different ways of thinking about it, though. Like life in general is art, but.
Well, and something else that's occurring to me too is that your livelihood isn't dependent on the sale of your art. And I remember Elizabeth Gilbert talking about that. I think it was in her book, Big Magic, or in the podcast she did along with it. But just talking about how she never asked her creativity to like financially support her. It wasn't until much further along. And I can really like that really resonates because it does put this like pressure onto it to always be doing it, maybe. Unless you're just in circumstances where that isn't required of you, but it seems like it'd be hard to have that. But thinking about maybe a question for everyone too, is just thinking about how do you keep your life in such a way, construct your life in a way that your art is always free to become whatever it needs to become without carrying along a worry or you tagging a worry on it for financial means, or, you know, in the ultimate way, like even external praise, which is hard to not want, or recognition. I think that feeling of wanting your art to be desired or appreciated is really strong, especially after going through an academic environment where everybody is talking about your art with you all the time. And then you go to outside of that and like nobody cares about your art that much. Like, I mean, I can remember being in checkout lines and like people be like, what do you do? And I'll be like, oh, I'm an artist and a writer. And then they're like, oh, that's really cool. And then it stops.
Yeah.
Like that's the level at which most people care about your art.
And that idea can be freeing.
Yes.
You know, I've been having a lot of conversations with my sister about that and she like kind of brought up the same thing. She's like, you know, the secret is that nobody cares. Nobody really cares about what other people are doing. Everybody really cares about what they're doing. And like, they don't think about you. And I was like, I love that. I was like, wait, I love that because that means that I can just do it for me. I don't have to do it for anybody else. And that feels very good.
It does.
And I think that conversation of turning your art into a business is a huge one. I've always kind of been of the mind that I don't want to be financially dependent on my art because I don't ever want the market to drive what I'm making. I want to always feel like I'm following. And you know, for some people that might line up.
Right. And some people it lines up beautifully. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I think for me, I just don't, I make really weird stuff. So I'm just like, there's gotta be I don't ever want the market's needs to decide what I'm exploring, you know?
Yeah.
So.
And that does take, I think that can take a lot of courage because what you're doing in that decision is saying that you're going to step outside the norm. You're going to step outside the expectations of the norm. The expectation of the norm artist is maybe that, I don't even like that word, but that maybe just expectations of an artist professionally can be that you pursue an idea and you stay really focused in on that same idea for a long period of time so that there's consistency in the body of your work. And of course, there's benefits to that, of course, but there is also limitations to that too. And I think over this time period that we've been in the last couple of years, I've also noticed a lot of artists who have had a particular style developed and become well recognized now speak quite openly about the challenge of burnout in that experience too, of the expectation of that this is the kind of work you make and that it's harder at a certain point then to become an explorer again. And so thinking about how we as artists maybe have, like, there's probably some element of consistency that is good for building a career, but how do you also always keep an element of experimentation as part of your practice in that?
That was always something, especially in undergrad, that I struggled with because I would see all these professional artists that I looked up to that were making, you know, basically, you know, different iterations of the same mug, you know, and I saw my peers doing that too sometimes. And that just I didn't have the urge to do that. I think some people do. And I I remember feeling so confused because I was like, but I don't want to do that. It would make me feel so trapped, but that's what everybody's doing. That's what you're supposed to do. But I remember a conversation. I also, a lot of the time when I'm working through creative roadblocks, I remember a conversation I had with you, which was talking about how you should try to eliminate as many shoulds in your life as you can.
Yeah.
So
whenever I hear myself saying should, it's like this red flag of like, hold on, you need to reflect. Is that really a should? And nothing is a should. So it's either a need, a want, or it needs to be let go of. Like, I feel like those are sort of my ways that I'm trying to approach it now too, because it's an active process to get rid of the shoulds. And, I don't remember if we talked about this or not when you were a student, but I mean, I think about artists like Louise Bourgeois and Richard Tuttle. And like, I remember when I came upon their works, it just like opened up things for me because I saw that that people do make a career of exploring essentially. And like Louise Bourgeois, because she moves from medium to medium, words, her journals, her like fabric, marble, like it's all there. And it's also all hers. And just knowing that there are examples like that, like I think sometimes there's security. We need a little bit of like evidence. Maybe I need a little evidence to see like, oh yeah, I could take that leap because this person has already done that and it was okay. But also like, what's the worst that's going to happen? I was thinking about earlier, you were sharing, like when you share your work online, what were you worried about? Like, and online can be a rough place, but like when you shared it, did anyone write and go like, Steph, this is crap. Like, what are you doing?
No, Rhonda, it's all me.
Right?
It's all me deciding that people are thinking something that they're probably not thinking.
We have no business thinking about what other people are thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, it's so stupid. It's like we're all just trying to have fun on this earth.
I know, if we just made space for everyone to sort of find their own joy, find their own fun, like maybe we would all be like in a whole nother space with our thinking and our sense of community with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Well, I was just kind of looking at a couple notes I had too that I wanted to go back to. This is kind of very much shifting gears a little bit here, but I was noticing, so you were talking about different jobs you had since graduating or near the end of graduation. Like you worked at the glass studio for Corning, you worked in an arts admin job, and then you made note that you take classes and workshops though during this time while you were doing these jobs. Could you just share with people a little bit more about each of those jobs in ways that, if any, they connected to your creativity or they provided any more information to what your creative practice needed to look like or wanted to look like, or if they're disconnected? Just kind of wondering a little bit about your work experience too during this time.
I think the greatest benefits from all of the organizations I've been involved in is meeting people. So I guess starting at the beginning at Corning, there definitely was a great growth of technical ability. My technique increased just because I was blowing glass the full time. But the greatest value I think I walked away with was meeting other people in the field, building, seeing that you can build a support system. There are other people doing this, and they want to share ideas with you as well. I think the best thing about working at art organizations in the cities, primarily I worked at Northern Clay Center, and the best part of that was meeting all of the artists. Mm-hmm. There's an incredible community of people that is just waiting to be tapped into, mm-hmm. And I was really fortunate to have a lot of role models and mentors throughout just coming out of undergrad, with like you and Randy and Jan and all sorts of people you introduced us to as well. But it's just meeting these people that are active artists in the field, and the secret to it is they're just people too.
They are just people too.
And they all have their own insecurities, and they all have their own things that excite them. And yeah, it really is so important. That's the best thing I got out of it, is meeting other people that have the same goal or are striving for a similar thing. And they've all found different paths towards that. And they all have different perspectives they can offer, Do you find, or did you find during those times that the artists that you encountered were also receptive to having conversations with a younger artist like yourself? Oh, yeah, of course, because I think people always want to share their thoughts and opinions, right? It's so fun I'm having so much fun right now, Rhonda, telling you what I think about things. And I love hearing what other people think about things. So it was just extremely rare that I would meet someone that was closed off, that didn't want to engage in conversation, or I would ask a lot of questions. I really like hearing about people's paths, how they started, what changes happened, what they struggled with, things like that. And a lot of people, I also think the older people get, the more they do want to share their wisdom. Yeah. I guess they want to try to help you, but it's also such a great collaboration. And I think another thing that I love about my friendships in the art world is they are cross-generational. You don't see that in a lot of other places where, you're friends with someone from a different generation. It doesn't happen as naturally, I think. Yeah. Maybe in other places, but there's so much value to that.
What advice would you give, or steps could you offer to someone who's like, well, I just moved to this area and I know this artist lives here. How do you have any tips you can share with how to reach out to someone?
Yeah, I think sometimes it depends on the medium they work in. Like, I feel like, you guys, if it's a clay artist, they are going to say yes. Just, it's like, just ask if you could do a studio visit. Some people might be more private. But most people would be like, yeah, come on out. I'll show you the kiln. Like, let's get to know each other. I think it always helps if you have someone in common. So you can say, hey, Rhonda introduced me to your work. And yeah. And I know you guys went to school together or something. I'd really love to, whatever. I mean, yeah. offer to buy them coffee or bring them donuts or something. I think a big part of the joy of being an artist is the community of it. And so more often than not, people are eager to meet you. It can be hard though. It can be intimidating. It can feel weird to just contact someone and say, can I meet you? Yeah. But more often than not, I think you'll find that it's just normal.
It is. And I might add, like, if someone says no, or like, not right now, like, just move on if you can, and know that it isn't personal. Like, that person might just have a boundary that they set up, or there might be other reasons that just like move on to the next person. And know that most, I've never really heard of somebody being mean about turning someone down. They might be just direct, but yeah, just know that it's not personal if someone says no, and then just,
Yeah,
look for someone else.
for
I think I
sure.
love your advice though, that people want, like most artists in ceramics in particular, want to talk with other people.
Yeah.
Like they look forward to that.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think it's just knowing that it's not weird to
It's
ask.
not weird to ask at all.
It's normal. People do it all the
It's
time.
all the time, all the time. And even I think along the same line, like reaching out to someone online, like sending them a quick email of if you have a question or just something you appreciate about their work, or like that's also not weird. People
Yeah.
people enjoy that. My daughter just wrote to an author that she really loves her books. And this woman is like she's a New York Times selling author for YA novels. And the woman wrote back to her. It was so sweet. Shout out to Roseanne Perry for doing that. But
We love you, Roseanne Perry.
it made Iris's day. Like she was just like, she wrote back. And it was just such a sweet, generous action. And I think a lot of people are like that. If they have the time, they will reach out back. It's very
Yeah.
sweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're in what I call like studio time wrap up. And so I have a series of questions that I'm going to ask you that I ask every guest. And you can be as brief as you want or as long as you want with the answers. That part's entirely up to you. So feel free to expand if you want. So the first one is a finish the sentence. When I don't know what to create or make, I
ask myself how I want to create or make. So when I don't know what I want to make, I ask myself, well, what do I want to do right now? Do I want to build with my hands and my fingers? I'll make something in ceramics. Do I want to do some really small concentrated work? I'll do some beading. Do I want to do something repetitive? I'll crochet something. That's usually where I start.
I love it though, that you ask yourself, you change the question instead of what do I want to make, which I think is where a lot of people start, to how do I want to make? That's an important shift.
Yeah.
So I asked you to share 5 songs that you could listen to on repeat in your studio anytime. And actually, you gave me a 6th song. And do you want me to switch it out so that there's only 5, or you can have all 6?
I'll do 6.
Okay, great. I was like, I think you should just have 6 songs.
Yeah.
That's okay. So I'm going to read the songs with the title and then the artist. And then I have a question for you about these songs. Okay.
Okay.
The first one is Starsign by Litany. And then it's Woo with an exclamation by Remi Wolf. And You've Got Your Whole Life Ahead of You, Baby by IDER. Is that correct? IDER?
I don't know. I can't figure out how to say it.
IDER. Or I was like, is it like British, like IDER? You know how they say like IDER?
Yeah.
Maybe it's
Might be.
Might be. And then Oops, I Did It Again by Britney Spears. And The Girl from Panama?
Girl from Ipanema.
Ipanema, thank you.
And that can be by anyone.
And then the final song that you sent, because you were overthinking. I just want to add that in for everyone who overthinks.
It's true.
We'll feel identified and seen. Is The 90s by Phineas. So could you share how these songs contribute to your creative flow?
They get me dancing. They get me excited, and they light up the fun, excited parts of my brain. I think they're all very kind of upbeat, poppy songs. And I think they all take me back to, they just bring me into this space where, a space without worry and without overthinking, maybe just a space of fun. I like to have fun when I'm making, and they take me into a space of giddiness. All of them except for Girl from Ipanema, which Girl from Ipanema any version of it you can listen to. And that's just the most calming song in the world. So I listen to that if I'm feeling too tightly strung, and that can calm you down.
Nice. We all need those songs.
Yeah.
Okay. My next question is, what brings you joy in your creative life?
Giggling. I like to make weird things that make people giggle. That's what really brings me the most joy, is if somebody else looks at it and laughs and is just like, oh, classic Steph. But but if we're talking just me, what brings me joy is, I guess it's the same thing. It's just something that makes me giggle or reminds me of a different time, or if it's something that I feel proud to have finished. Yeah. Overall giggles.
Giggles.
Yeah.
I know. I think I have some of your stickers. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I have the Googly eye sticker of the pot on my water bottle. And it makes me laugh every time.
I love that.
I think because you did that one time early on in the pandemic, I opened my refrigerator door to find that my kids had glued Googly eyes to a bunch of the products in the fridge. And I think it coincided with when I received that sticker.
That is genius.
It was very funny. At first I was like, oh God, now I got to clean this up. And then I was like, how funny and delightful is it though, that there are Googly eyes in our refrigerator right now?
On our milk carton.
Yes. It was on like everything. Even like fruit had it on it.
Oh my God. That's so funny. Your kids are the best.
Oh, they make life pretty enjoyable. That's for sure. All sorts of things. So thank you for bringing that joy into our lives.
You're welcome. Of course. Happy to do it anytime.
Oh, okay. My last question for you is another finish the sentence. My creativity is.
Oh, I have so many words I'm thinking of. Let's see.
You can say them all.
I would say my creativity is a well. Maybe. Something you can keep going back to whenever you need more. First, I thought infinite, and then I thought, no, that's stupid. And then I thought, yeah, my creativity is who I am, maybe. Important. Seems a little too simple.
But truthful.
This is the one, Rhonda. This is the moment that's going to stick with me. I'm going to think of the perfect answer later, and then I'm going to kick myself.
Send me an email and I will put it on the page and I'll be like, she rethought it and this is her answer.
Her creativity is this.
Ignore whatever else she said.
Yeah.
Not well, it's not infinite, not important. It's just this.
Yeah. It's a lot of things. My creativity is a lot of things.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for taking the time to speak with me today. It was just a true pleasure and joy.
Thank you, Rhonda. This was really fun.
All right. Bye.
Bye, Rhonda.
She never did email me to rethink her answer to my creativity is, but I think it's very clear that Stephanie's creativity is playful and joyful in spirit. Let's take some inspiration from Stephanie this week. Head to the kids aisle, physically or metaphorically. Grab some bubble wrap, silly string, pipe cleaners, anything. and make something that brings forth a giggle. Not quite ready to play in the kids' aisle? Grab a piece of paper or a page in your sketchbook or journal. Place your name or one of your identities in the middle of the page and name all the parts that make it so. Like in our conversation, we said that making art is only one of the spokes of an artist's identity. To see Stephanie's wide range of joyful material use, be sure to visit her Instagram page at Stephanie Lenertz. And remember, never leave the kids' aisle. Thank you for joining us for this episode. If you enjoyed the podcast, please share it and rate and review wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next week, bye.